Okay, so we are live and just wait a little moment for start and uh, just maybe wait for another minute until people will join. So we are actually streaming on multiple channels. Please feel free to use the chat boxes on your platform where you're watching it and just ask questions during the presentation. And I will just collect all the questions and then we will just answer them after the presentation. We expect the whole webinar will not take longer than 20-30 minutes. So 20 minutes, 25 minutes for presentation and then remaining questions. Please feel free just to drop your questions in the chat. So I think we are ready to go. Rick, you ready?
I'm ready.
Awesome. So welcome everyone. My name is Renat Zubayrov. I'm one of the founders and CEO of RevOS AI, a company from Germany. And we are very proud to present to you our webinar today together with a brilliant Rick Reynolds. So Rick is CEO and of our partner company called AskForensics. Amazing experience. I think Rick will just go through this during our webinar. And really excited that you are here, Rick. Very, very hi, welcome.
Thank you, Renat. Since you used the word brilliant in front of my name, I'm going to need a wider screen. That's
Very good. Yeah,
way too kind.
yeah.
There we go. It's not working.
It's not working now. I'm just testing my new features here of my application here.
There we go.
It's actually coming together. Yeah. So excellent. So we prepared some slides and presentation for today. What we're going to speak, and then I just will give it over to Rick.
Well, thank you, Renat, and thank you everybody for joining our webinar today. We're going to discuss the subtle critical differences between accounts being strong, vulnerable, and damaged. Our focus is to enable you to accelerate growth in 2024. We have three agenda items. First, we will review tipping points and key characteristics of accounts in the three categories I just shared: strong, vulnerable, and damaged. Secondly, we will review 7 pragmatic ideas to address and recover damaged accounts. And third, we want to leave some time for Q&A. So this is what we will be covering today. First, before we get into the data, let's lay some groundwork. AskForensics evaluates key sales pursuits and account to objectively assess the health and performance. And we complete these assessments through extensive probing telephone interviews, one-on-one with senior client executives. Over the past 16 years and spanning over $22 billion worth of total contract value, we have consistently identified 85% of all of the accounts are at risk. This means that everybody on this webinar today likely has a majority of their customers where you have issues that are percolating. This does not mean that they will terminate agreements immediately, but what it does mean is that at any point, these issues can escalate and become bigger problems and impact renewal. And by the way, a common characteristic of the accounts that we profile and what went into the data we will be reviewing today is that these represent multi-year agreements that our clients have with their customers, typically 3 to 5 years per contract, oftentimes several contract cycles. So our findings reveal oftentimes many years of critical strategic relationships. So let's take a look at the tipping points. And before we begin, When we complete each evaluation, we assign a rating of 1 to 10, with 1 meaning the account is damaged beyond repair almost, and 10 meaning, wow, this is really, really strong. And if you go back to the um, uh, just the bell-shaped curve we had on the screen a moment ago, luckily most accounts are kind of in the mid-range. So let's start off with what makes an account a 10. We find that in looking at all of the data and cutting down to the bottom line on an account, we find that proactive recommendations and possessing segment expertise are common denominators on all strong accounts. And in particular, providing proactive recommendations is a more important issue in larger accounts. That being a relative term. For some companies, a large account could be $150,000 in contract value, and others it could be 45 million. But suffice it to say that in your larger accounts within your customer portfolio, you can expect that they expect you to share ideas on your own with them, not having to ask. So, Renat, let's take a look at the next threshold. What we see here when a customer is moving from a 10 to a 7 is a combination of both strengths and weaknesses. And a quick comment about an account being rated a 7. It's almost strong, right? So there aren't too many major issues to be concerned about, but what you see is the emergence of some. And what we see here in our data is that lack of proactive recommendations and the lack of a strategic relationship are emerging gaps that start entering the perceptions. And we find that on balance, providers retain having segment expertise. So when an account crosses this threshold, things are going okay, but there are some things beginning to come to the surface that could cause bigger problems, which will lead us, Renat, to the next threshold. And that is strategic erosion. You begin to see that the strategic relationship is lacking. There is insufficient strategic guidance. And these do then, of course, portend to relationship issues at the top of your customer's organization. And again, you see lack of proactive recommendations. So proactivity and being that expert play a role throughout the realm of account health. So now we move to the next threshold, and that's a damaged account. And luckily, this is a very small percentage of what we identify in our evaluations. But you see that the gaps are just more pronounced. There's no proactivity taking place. Communication issues exist. The strategic relationship is essentially non-existent when you look at both in terms of how they interact and in terms of strategic guidance. So in the big picture, when moving counterclockwise from a 10 down to a 1, you see that erosion, and you see it in those nuanced ways. These aren't issues that are always on the surface. These are issues that you can only glean by understanding your customers' requirements, having extensive data, both quantitative and qualitative, and having constant expertise delivered by your teams and the organization as a whole. So these are the key tipping points. Renat, if there are any questions, I'm happy to address them. If not, we can get right into our recommendations. Renat, I don't hear you.
Yeah, thank you. So this is amazing insights, Rick. Really good summary here based on so many years of experience and also so many accounts analyzed. But what do you think? What is the most common blind spots that companies have regarding their account health, and how do you think that what is the best approach to eliminate such and address these areas?
Well, the most common blind spot is really not understanding the full severity of the issues.
Mm.
Our clients, and probably everybody in this webinar with an organization, your companies are good. And with that, a lot of skill sets all around, from selling, account management, delivery, the whole bit. So it really gets down to understanding the severity, hence the nuances. So that's really what we find the biggest gaps to be. And typically, it's quite interesting when we have follow-up action planning sessions with our clients, which is where we review our findings. And Renat, you call that a playbook as well. I mean, you're getting the customers together, and you really want to help move them from great to more great, right? So we find that the customer-facing teams tend to be more I guess not confrontational is not the right word, challenging of the findings than senior executive leadership. And I guess that's to be expected because they're close to it. Their emotions, their relationships. I mean, we're humans. But we find that, and we love being challenged, nothing wrong with that, but we're only reflecting what the executives at their customers tell us. We're not editorializing. So it's quite revealing to see that gap. And what typically happens is the executive leadership that's engaged in these playbooks and the sessions, they're the ones saying, hey, gang, let's not try to tear this apart. This is what they said. Let's deal with it. These are perceptions. They could be right, they can be wrong, but they're perceptions. So that's the biggest gap, is understanding that severity.
Very, very interesting. This is, I remember in some conversations also with our customers, we were very frequently running into the similar questions we couldn't really answer well, because obviously the outside perspective which you bring into the conversation, do you think it's also similar to what the potential competitor questions, or questions that potential competitor would ask, like your customers?
Very much so, Renat, and that's a great question. When you look at the objective of what our organizations collectively do, we want to help our clients grow and retain their customer base. And what we want to avoid is a competitor coming in during, say, the RFP rebid process, where you're the incumbent. We want to avoid your competitors coming in, doing their fresh eyes due diligence, and bringing to light the issues that could have been discovered 12, 18 months earlier and you could have addressed.
Right.
Every time we evaluate a sales loss, the data points to the past performance. How did the provider deal with that account in the past? And that's what kills it. They're the gaps. And that could be a whole nother webinar, but those gaps exist because they didn't know about them. But the competitors come in, they identify them, then they're the ones putting out these great ideas. And then your client looks at you and say, well, where have you been the past 3 years? Why haven't you shared these with us? So that's what we want to help every attendee in this webinar, and anyone happening to see this video following. We want to help companies avoid that dilemma.
Now, this is amazing. I just have so many questions, but I think like we will skip to the most interesting part for me personally, is like, what are the actionable items we can just take home to get today with us, and then just apply them from the next week to be much better in 2024.
That sounds great. Can you create some fireworks or not when you change the slide? Bammo, here we go. All right. As I mentioned, we have 7 pragmatic ideas, and we picked the number 7 because there are 7 days in a week, and that's what we can all handle without having to make a written down list. So Renat, let's take it away. Recommendation number 1. Identify and acknowledge that you have problems. That's the first step. You need to have some information. You need to have those insights that something exists, both good and bad. So that's the first step. Now, how can you achieve that? Well, I mentioned earlier the RevOS solution. That model is predicated on using data and uncovering gaps, and having the algorithms to identify where there could be some issues. AskForensics, we uncover key insights our our clients just usually don't hear. Sales teams are great frontline teams to help identify where there could be issues, account teams as well. But first, you have to identify and acknowledge there's a problem. That is the first step. Renat, let's go to recommendation number 2. Develop and implement a triage plan. When an account is damaged, it's much like taking a patient to the emergency room. You have to stop the bleeding. You don't have a time to analyze. You have to stop the bleeding, stabilize the patient, and then start working on your plans to make that patient healthier. And that's exactly what it's like having to deal with a damaged customer. Now, what can you do? Well, first, start it when you identify some gaps that you can readily fix. Do it right away. There could be one, there could be several. Who knows what those issues involve? But take immediate action to stabilize that account, and then you can begin to put together more of a triage plan to get you through some short-term immediate changes, say within 4 weeks, to move that account from a 1 to maybe a 3. But that's a huge movement of the needle if you can achieve that. So stop the bleeding and save the patient. Let's move on to recommendation number 3. Engage with client leadership. Your customers know there's a problem. I mean, they've shared it with your teams. Your teams may not fully understand the magnitude. You have other voice of the customer programs in place. Even if you don't, you have your gut instincts that some things are taking place. When you have that turnaround plan, even in an early stage, reach out to your customer. And the leadership level is most important. But you have a whole hierarchy of team members. So the day-to-day account relationship people could and should be interacting with their counterparts at the customer organization, and involve your leadership, regional, C-level, whatever's needed, to start reaching out with that client so they understand that you recognize there are issues and that you're working on revenues. Let's move on to recommendation number 4. Achieve quick results. Typically, when we do an evaluation, and we're not with RevOS, I know you're looking at many variables in your model. Typically, there could be 3 to 5 issues that need to be addressed. Achieve quick results. Just take care of the low-hanging fruit. Don't feel you have to engage with your client on things that you could just remedy yourselves. Make corrective actions, start achieving improvements, but just initiate as quickly as you can what you can, and then work on the details later. Recommendation number 5. Establish agreed upon KPIs, key performance indicators, with your customer and monitor your performance. This is where you can begin to take your triage plan and start putting together that strategic ongoing plan. But when you engage with your client to agree upon the KPIs, then there's full agreement on what they're going to be looking at and what you're going to be looking at. So that is a key step to developing that plan, and continually monitor your performance against those KPIs using quantitative data, anecdotal insights, whatever you can glean from your current programs or new ones that you decide to add. Monitor what's taking place and remedy the gaps at their earliest inception. So this just brings your customer into the process and your partners, not adversaries. Let's move on to recommendation number 6. Continually assess account health. It's almost like an annual physical. If you take 3 years between your physical, you could have 3 years of problems in between. So you want to continually assess your health. And by that, whatever types of tools you have in place to monitor performance, be it tactical performance, strategic performance, whatever, continually measure those KPIs and assess the account health. And why is this important? Well, you have disruptions all around. Your competitors are out there. Even if they're not knocking on your customers' doors, your customers are aware of other solutions. Technology's changed. I mean, 2 years ago, who would have thought machine learning and AI would be taking over the way it has now? Uh,
Mhm.
so the bar is constantly changing. Needs and requirements change. Executives change. There's turnover everywhere. So continually assess your account health because nothing is static. And the final recommendation here, what everybody's been waiting for, proactively recommend ideas. I mean, that's just getting back to what we saw in going around the circle from a 10 to a 1. Your customers want to hear from you. You're that subject matter expert. So continually share ideas. And our philosophy is, even if 9 out of 10 of the recommendations that you put forth aren't selected or they don't want to move ahead with them, the one that they do could be that home run. And again, you don't want your competitors coming in and putting out the great ideas. You want to be taking and seizing the initiative to do that. So all through the process, recommend ideas, bring in best practices. How do you get these ideas? Well, you have a lot of talent on your teams. Look at your other accounts, particularly ones that are similar to the customer that's damaged, let's say, and start bringing in ideas, solutions, tactics that work well in the healthy accounts that are similar that you can apply here. So these are our 7 recommendations. That there could be more, but heck, we just want to get it down to something that's manageable. So these are pragmatic ideas that we have seen work in turning damaged accounts into strong accounts.
Very nice. Very, very interesting, Greg. Thank you very much. This is a very tangible recommendations which everyone can just start applying starting from tomorrow, and really very, very, very down to earth and pragmatic in systems like how to access it. And what do you think? Like, I already getting some first questions here. Rick, could you share a standout moment when forensic analysis reversed a company fortune? Like maybe some nice examples here.
Oh, this is a timely question. Just the other day, we were talking with a client and good friend, and they were sharing with us some experience, and that experience was that they had a customer, a $10 million piece of business, that they kept using as a reference account and a case study for when they were selling. Uh, for the first time, new pursuits, if you will. So they kept referencing this one company, and they felt it was super strong. I mean, why would you not recommend a client if it was super strong? Well, we happened to be assigned that account to do a deep dive into, and what we found was that it was quite vulnerable, and our client never knew that. I mean, for years they were sharing it as the success, and we found, it really wasn't that successful. What did we find that kind of made it not successful? And if our rating was probably a 7. So they had a lot of positive attributes, but we found one or really two key gaps. The most prevalent being that they weren't meeting a critical need. The customer had one particular need that was off the charts, and our client wasn't meeting that need. They could have had 9 other needs that they were meeting, but they weren't meeting that one. And they were not hearing from our client on proactive actions that they were taking to meet that need. So that was a critical gap, perhaps more of a critical gap than normal, because they were spotlighting that customer. And you you need to be careful. We've seen many instances where our clients are giving out a reference account, and their prospects reach out and they're hearing negative things. So you'd want to avoid that. So that's one experience that jumps out, and that had a huge impact because I think our client was able to either stop using that customer as a reference, or B, change it and keep using them as a reference.
Yeah, that sounds like a worst case scenario when a reference customer from all the marketing materials out there um, goes sideways, right? So it's like really difficult. Yeah.
Well, it's interesting, Renat, if I just add one little layer of richness. Everyone looks at net promoter scores and what are those scores, right? And the higher the score, the better. And our questions are open-ended. We're not after, ratings when we get answers. We really want people to expand. But at the very end, we ask each executive, hey, on a 1 to 10 scale, how likely would you be to recommend? And we hardly ever look at that answer. I mean, it's a data point. When we're evaluating, we assign a number as we just went over. And I would say in virtually every account we analyze, the willingness to recommend when a respondent has to pick one number, it's always higher than the holistic grade we give that account, which basically means that, when you take into account all of the information you hear in a 30-minute discussion, you're going to have a rating that's based on a lot of insights. Whereas if you're just assigning a number, that's a quick answer. So the risk is that you think your accounts could be an 8, 9, or 10, but if they engage in a one-to-one dialogue with a prospect, it could really maybe be a 6 or a 7, and you don't know that. So that's just kind of an interesting data point.
It's really scary. Yeah, definitely. Yeah. So, and I think now it's a good time for questions and answers, or the Q&A session. So the all live participants would have an ability now to ask the questions, and if anyone would watch this in recording this webinar, so just feel free to reach out to us. I just see now the question. How do you differentiate between an account that's simply vulnerable and other ones and lost or closely to be lost based on your analysis?
Renat, there are so many factors that come into play into account health, but basically the common theme on any account being in that red category, it is the inability to deliver what your core business is, and that's pretty much where the big hurdles are. I mean, just to bring it in to even a household, if you have a yard service, and if they're not doing a good job with your yard, I mean, that's what they're hired to do. That you're going to terminate them. Whereas if they just don't blow off your driveway to the level that you want, but everything else is okay, you'll deal with that. So that's just to bring in a real world everyday thing a lot of people can relate to. But that's what it comes down to. The inability to deliver your core competence. And that happens. And it doesn't mean that you're not delivering. It means the perception is that you're not. And there could be one little variable that a customer sees that overrides all the good. So, Renat, that's pretty much the common theme on why customers are in the red zone.
So it's very interesting. Very, very good. Thank you. Thanks, Rick. This is we are slowly but surely scratching now to the 30-minute mark. And basically, if there are any further questions, we would really love to hear them and also accept them through the chat after this webinar, or just reach out to us. And I think what we would like to also announce for now, that all the participants who registered for this webinar would get also the slides from today's webinar, so that you can take it with you and also just apply all the interesting insights and know-how that Rick today presented to your work, as well as actually a practical recommendation and really practical insights, which we from RevOS generated out of over 100 interviews with customer success managers worldwide, and apply them and put them into an ebook format on how to do the best possible customer health scoring, which we have seen one of the top seven recommendations on how to assess and also recover the customers and also grow faster in 2024. And apart from that, I think in the remaining few seconds, we have some interesting also announcements here to make. This basically the RevOS and AskForensics. We are joining our forces in a product called Vista Analytics. This is actually your secret weapon to amplify the sales and boost retention. Here we are combining two unique expertise from RevOS and AskForensics, where RevOS is contributing this very solid technological platform in terms of business analytics, business intelligence, and data and application integration, together with absolutely unique insights from the AskForensics based on the over 20 billion of analyzed accounts worldwide over the last 15 years. Rick, you want to add something to it?
Other than it's been a pleasure being involved in this webinar, and thank everybody for attending. Renat, I couldn't add any more to your summary of Vista Analytics, so I didn't want to take the risk of taking away from any of your comments there. So hopefully what we shared today has some practical impact on your business. Our focus as 2023 is coming to a close is to put you in the driver's seat to prep for a highly accelerated 2024 coming up.
That's a very, very good follow-up for. Thank you, Rick. It was a pleasure talking to you, and hope to see you soon in the different occasions and also different webinars together.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Bye-bye.